But first, this week's one-on-one in 10 with Green Party co-leader Chlöe Swarbrick. Kia ora, comrade. Welcome to the show, and thank you for being available to the Fourth Estate. Your democracy is grateful.
Kia ora. Thanks for having me, Bomber.
I want to start tonight, if I may, Chloe, on this appalling military aggression by Donald Trump, enabling Israel in strikes against Iran and then bombing Iran's nuclear program themselves. We are quick and righteous in denouncing Russia for walking away from the rules-based order. Where is that courage when Western allies are breaching those exact same standards?
I mean, you said it well. Yeah, I think that this really goes to show the unfortunate walking back that our current government is doing by virtue of not acting on our historical record of standing on our independent foreign policy and being really crystal clear about where human rights need to be upheld. You know, there is one entity in the Middle East that definitively has nuclear weapons, and we know that that is Israel.
Right.
We have seen, as you say, the government be incredibly quick to act, including the last government, when it comes to Russia's illegal invasion of and occupation of Ukraine. And, you know, that's part of the reason that I drafted my illegal occupation of Palestine sanctions bill with the exact same approach that was taken in that legislation, given that what we're seeing currently unfold in Palestine is, if not far worse.
We had Helen Clark on last week's show, and she was adamant that there is no legal justification for these strikes and argued that while this is occurring, Gaza and the West Bank are under even greater military violence threat. What should New Zealand be doing here? Should we be expelling the Israeli ambassador?
I mean, we should have done that a long, long time ago when it became abundantly apparent that Israel was not abiding by the international rules-based order. Who are we to say that we expect human rights to be upheld if we're not willing to stand by and ask for them to be upheld ourselves? So yes, Bomber, the government should have moved a heck of a lot quicker. I mean, if we just look at the comparisons with how the government moved with regard to, and you know, this government, when in opposition, called for far faster movement when it came to Russia. But we're not willing to apply those same standards when, as you say, it comes to the actions of our supposed allies. But friends don't let friends abuse human rights. At the end of the day, who do we want to be as Aotearoa in New Zealand? What history do we want to hand down to our kids? What is the legacy that we want to have? What we are currently witnessing, particularly in Gaza, is a live-streamed genocide where people who have been made refugees in their own lands are being mercilessly carpet-bombed. I don't think that there's ever been a more compelling case for the international community to be crystal clear about what we stand for.
Preach. Our Prime Minister was in Beijing meeting Chinese leader Xi Jinping and made the extraordinary comment that China is not working with Russia, Iran and North Korea to undermine the West, as alleged by NATO's top official. He's now at the NATO summit. How will New Zealand's confused position be taken by other NATO officials? And who do you think is a bigger threat to New Zealand's interests, China or America?
You put me on the spot there for a really low stakes statement on our foreign policy and position. But hey, look, this actually goes to something else which the Greens released today, which was some independent expert legal advice that we commissioned ourselves because it was clear that the government had not done the work when we spotted in the May budget lockup that the $200 million that they had allocated for fossil fuel subsidies, a $200 million handout to get more gas production happening in this country, which their own regulatory impact statement says is not going to come online until at least earliest 2034, so it's not a short-term measure. Our independent legal advice showed that that is a breach of the Agreement on Climate Change, Trade and Sustainability. Something the Honourable Minister Todd McClay, was championing and trumpeting back in November of last year, but it took them less than 6 months to breach it themselves. And Iceland will be around the table at that NATO summit, so perhaps the Prime Minister could tell them that not only is he spitting in the face of that agreement, but he's intent on pouring oil, coal and gas on the climate crisis fire.
The great Keith Locke once argued New Zealand's foreign affairs position should be friend to all, enemy to none. What do you believe?
I think that Keith said it well, and I think that this is a really interesting comment to reflect on in the context of how the Green Party are accused every few months, every few years of moving away from our roots or our legacy. And I just ask people to reflect on our same four core charter principles, which has been the same the entire time that the Green Party has existed. What differentiates us from Green parties around the world is a commitment, obviously, to Te Tiriti o Waitangi, which filters through all of those. But we believe in ecological wisdom, recognition of the fact that resources are finite. Even those resources that do regenerate need time and space, and God forbid some planning, Shane Jones, in order to regenerate. Secondly, social responsibility, known derogatorily on the internet as social justice, which is about how we go about ensuring that if we understand the central premise that these resources are somewhat finite, then we ensure everybody has access to their basic means to be able to participate in society. That's what real freedom actually looks like, those basic economic means. Then non-violence, we're hippies, we don't like going to war, but I think if you dig into that a little bit more, as Keith did, this is about how you create systems that don't neglect people who further down the track go, hey, this thing doesn't work for me. Fourthly, appropriate decision making, which is why we're such nerds for local government,
Yes.
And obviously very opposed to much of the attacks that this government is making on genuine localism.
The latest numbers on the economy paint a dire picture for the pro-growth government. ANZ economists today have slashed their June quarter GDP growth forecast to just 0.1%, down from 0.4%. 500,000 Kiwis need food banks each month. Fresh data from Auckland Council shows only 50% of building consents actually start being built within 6 months of the consent, meaning there will be a huge lag in construction, and government hopes that higher export earnings from dairy and meat would flow through into economic growth has been hit by news from the banks that farmers are using that extra cash to pay off debt and are buying new tractors at the slowest rate in 24 years. I put to you, Chlöe, that a steep economic downturn is coming for New Zealand and that the government's privatisation agenda will only make it worse.
100% Bomber. I mean, look, the rhetoric that we were hearing from the get-go from this government was trickle-down economics reheated. And we've seen it in their austerity playbook, whereby they have defunded public services, waited to watch till they wither and fail, and then attempt to kind of privatise that. And that's what we're seeing currently happening with the contracting for private hospitals. And what we know happens when those steps are taken is that profit becomes a motive. And this government is, in response to my questions in the House, ridiculed me for pointing out that that increases the cost of living for regular New Zealanders.
Yes.
You only need to look at the experience with the former national government partially privatising the electricity sector, which in turn has increased costs and reduced the public good initiative or incentive to introduce renewables into the mix.
Totally.
So it really, really boggles my mind. And this is part of the reason that we put on the table as the Greens, because quite frankly, Bomber, we were sick of just complaining about things and, unpicking all of the logic and the illogic for our Green budget in
Yes.
May of this year, where we showed that it is entirely feasible and entirely possible for us to be a country that extends our belief in universal basic services, the kinds of things that once upon a time were seen as impossible, the likes of free hospitals and free schooling. Well, we should also have free early childhood education
Yes.
and free GPs and free dental care. Yes, we are going to have to pay for it. That means being grown-ups about the reality that, of course, there are trade-offs when we're making decisions in our economy. That means that we are going to have a fairer tax system, and we're going to have more sophisticated conversations about debt. That's the reason that we released our alternative fiscal strategy just last week or the week before, where we showed that international debt markets take far more sophisticated variables into account than our government currently does with its
Yes.
own self-imposed fiscal straitjacket,
Yes.
which is totally divorced from real-world economic capacity,
Yeah.
which really goes to your core point, Bomber. For all of the rhetoric about growth, this government has actively been making decisions that are kneecapping that growth and indeed productivity, to the extent that we're now seeing 191 New Zealanders, 3/4 of them between the ages of 18 to 45, leaving this country every single day. That's a travesty.
Finally, your thoughts on the ACT Party's social media campaign targeting critics of their regulatory standards bill. Why would the party of free speech actively attempt to strangle others' free speech?
Nailed it. That's it really, isn't it? I mean, Look, I've been put on breakfast panels and debates with David Seymour since I was 22 years old.
And you beat him, and you beat him every time. You beat him you do. I'm keeping count. I'm keeping count.
I know, well, I was on your show back in 2016 when I was running for local body elections, but nonetheless, we digress. But what I have seen time and again is a man whose rhetoric is championing freedom of speech, but when push really comes to shove, he attacks people individually, personally, and on an ad hominem basis. And in addition to that, he can give it, but he can't take it. Yeah. And I just frankly, like at this point in the way that politics is working in modernity, New Zealanders deserve a heck of a lot better.
Preach. Thank you, comrade. We will see the Green Party leadership on the show next month. Thank you so much, Chlöe.
Catch you next time.
Cheers.